Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by a very special cadre of people to talk about a game that I've recently discovered. No one's ever heard about it before, until it came to PlayStation 5 just months ago. I'm only kidding. It's called Pentiment. And I've gathered the two people in the company that I think have played it. I think Maddie might have played it too, but people that played it and enjoyed it. I know this game game came out in November of 2022 on Xbox and PC, and you can still play it over there and on Game Pass, obviously. But it came more recently in February to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, as well as Switch, which is where Micah played it. Cog obviously played it on Xbox. I played it on PS5. And I've really been smitten with this game. And so I wanted to sit down and talk about it because I think it's so interesting. Now, it's worth noting that this might end up being one of two episodes we do about Pentiment, because I do have feelers out with Xbox about getting Josh Sawyer, who's the director of the game, on the show. I think he's maybe on vacation. Plus, Obsidian is working on other things, obviously. The Outer Worlds, too. And so on and so forth. Fallout New Vegas, too. I'm only kidding. So they're probably pretty busy, but I did talk to Jeff Rubenstein over there, who was an old friend of mine who worked at PlayStation for many years before he went to Xbox. And he said that he's going to pass it by the team and see what happens. So we might do two episodes on Pentiment, but this is one I definitely wanted to do. And if we do the episode with Josh Sawyer, that's going to be more about the history of it. And we'll get really into the nerdy shit that I love about the game. I won't fucking bore anyone too much with that. So first of all, let's go around the horn and welcome everyone to the show. Cog, welcome. Good to see you. Love your Obsidian shirt.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. How's it going? I'm doing good. A lot going on. But as far as this is concerned, I was very excited. I saw the call. I said, yes, this is one of those card games. And glad that Switch owners and PlayStation owners could finally bask in the joy that I had with Pentiment. No, but I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, man. Me too. And then Micah, welcome. My dear Micah, my wife. How are you today? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm doing very well. Cog and I, we're taking over. This is a special Soul Train edition of Sacred Symbols Plus. All right. We are no longer in the minority. We're taking this one over. No, this is gonna be a fun one. Of all the people actually that I expected to join us for the episode, I didn't realize that Cog liked this game. And I was like, oh, well, that's just fantastic. So this will be fun.
Yeah, it is funny. You guys are, it's like, what is it? Saturday night at the Apollo?
Yes, yeah. We doing the Apollo. We got Don Cornelius out here for the Soul Train. It's going down. It's going down.
Yeah, Don Cornelius is awesome. Like when I watch, like there's like a whole like reel of his intros, you know, that he does to like introduce all the, and he's so, oh my God, he must have banged anyone he wanted.
He was the man back then. He was the man.
But I loved Apollo, like Saturday nights at the Apollo or whatever. I'd watch that late at night on Saturdays on NBC4. On Long Island, and I loved the dude that they would like boo him off, and then the guy would like come on stage and like
with the hook, get the hook and the Sandman come out and the little.
So funny, so funny. All right, well, I'm by the way, I am an honorary black man now.
Yes, you are. You are more than invited to the cookout. You are a member now.
That's wonderful. I was seeing there was a video going around before because, as people know, we always talk about I'm Italian, but my family's really Sicilian. And there was this video of this like woman doing this ethnic weird dance, and they're like, these people try to tell you they're white. I'm like, hey yo. All right. Well, we're here to talk about Pentiment. Now, this game was somewhat significant for PlayStation fans because it's different than Switch fans who also got it, just because Switch had already gotten the Ori games from Xbox Studios. So even though there were second party games from Moon, the patina of that was kind of worn off. It was kind of, people were a little more used to that. It was very unusual that these games came to PlayStation. And as people know, it's the first of 4 games that were announced. I think it was that, then Grounded, then Hi-Fi Rush, and then Sea of Thieves, which ended up being huge and still huge. One of the most played games on PlayStation right now. So I bought it when it came out. I honestly wasn't very interested in this game. If there's a game on Xbox that I'm truly, truly, truly interested, like when I played the Halo games recently, or Indiana Jones is kind of one of those games, although I suspect that is going to come over, I will migrate. And Pentiment was just one of those games where I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm not really into Renaissance history that much, in European history. I love all history in some sense, but it just what didn't speak to me. So when it came to PlayStation, I kind of just bought it to, as I said on the show, to show my support. And it just sat on my cross media bar on PlayStation, and I kept skipping it, and it just kept getting pushed further and further back to the point where I was just going to delete it and be like, I'll get to it another time. And then I fell into this lull where I'm like, I've been playing a lot of boomer shooters. I've been playing the Chinese Room catalog and doing some other stuff. Actually, more recently, I just beat Still Wakes the Deep. We'll talk about that soon as well. Gotta be honest, not that impressed. Just gonna throw that out there.
Interesting.
Completely on rails. Very weird game for them. In some sense, not literally on rails. It's not like a shoot, like a fucking Time Crisis game, but you know what I mean. So anyway, I found this lull, and I didn't really know what to play. There's not that much happening. There's a lot of smaller games coming out. So I was like, I'm gonna play Pentiment, and then I immediately got sucked into it, and it's really, really unique and special. In some sense, it's like the perfect game for Game Pass, and yet they need many of these kinds of games, and yet I feel like no one really played it. And I was looking at the achievements versus the trophies. A quarter of people that played it on PlayStation beat it. 10% of people that played it on Xbox beat it. That's obviously the Game Pass effect of people just trying and bouncing out. But it goes to show you that it's actually not being beaten even by very many people on PlayStation either, even though it's a 10 to 12 hour game. I played it for 13 hours, but I was really nerdy with the glossary. Micah was getting mad at me for reading it on a regular basis. She's like, you don't know what Venice is? Like, yeah, I know what Venice is, but I want to know what they say about Venice.
Yeah, but the reason I was getting annoyed though was because I know you were gonna get burnt out with it, because you literally were like, do they have to do this animation every time you bring up the glossary? And it's like, stop clicking on words you know. All right, if you know what Venice means, then don't click on it, because then it brings up the little page, and it's like, stop doing it.
Yeah, I just wanted to see what they said from the pre-unification, point of view. But nonetheless, you're right. I did stop reading it after a while. But I don't know. I really thought this game was very special. I'm not really into adventure games, specifically adventure games that require puzzle solving. But what I said on Sacred, and this is a little bit clumsy of a reference, but it reminds me a little bit of a Quantic Dream game. Not in that it's not a Quantic Dream game, but in that you can't do anything wrong, in quotes. Like whatever you do, it just goes. You can't really die or fuck it up. It's not time-based like in Detroit where you just wait around and then something will happen. But the game goes. It doesn't really matter what you say, what you do. There's no end state. It's not a bad ending of a choose your own adventure novel or anything like that. It's different. So from that point of view, even though there's a very light puzzle solving, I beat it. So I couldn't believe it because I don't play adventure games without a guide, but I didn't use a guide for this game, and I beat it, and I thought it was totally easy. So from that perspective, it was not challenging at all. And then there's a lot of Mass Effect like choices and things that matter, and then they kind of don't end up mattering at the end, but I don't really care about that. And by the way, I didn't care about that in Mass Effect 3 either. So I don't know. There was a lot of, I was very attracted to it. The art style, the animation, what I thought was a really effective portrayal of old people, middle-aged people, young people, teenagers. Games do that really poorly. Micah and I always kid around about Fallout, about how the Fallout kids are just shrunk down like human models. And even in Fallout 3, I remember there's a colony of kids and you can't kill them. You can't shoot at them. You can't do anything to them. They always treat kids weird. In this, I like how there just seems to be proper age and representation across that age gamut. So there's a lot I like about this game. So let me go around and hear from you guys top level thoughts on Pentiment. And Cog, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, the history with me with this game is kind of funny because, obviously a huge Obsidian fan. I think this is one of the best acquisitions that Xbox made. And I remember the announcement of a game that Josh Sawyer is going to work on. And I'm like, okay, so in my mind, I built myself up. This was going to be some AAA experience. And I remember first seeing it revealed, right? And I was like, okay, what is this? It's like Bible stories, the game. What am I watching? I didn't know what this was. So I came in with a negative bias. And I was like, man, I was hoping he'd do something big. But then obviously, learning about the creation of Pentiment, and this was kind of something that he's always wanted to do. And being such a historian that he is, and learning about 16th century, Europe and what's going on with the Reformation and Martin Luther. So I'm like, you know what? No one's really tackled this before in a game that I've never seen. So I say, all right, let me give it a try. And I do like what we consider the narrative base, either what you call it, a walking sim, or, games that involve a lot of choice, but a lot of narrative. But I remember getting a hold of it. And like you, Colin, once I started it, I could not put it down. And it became something it was just like this beautiful dance of just listening to people, gathering information. But the cool thing is, like you said, time continues. Time continues. And the thing that was really cool is just the way, like from a class level, the different levels of people, when you're speaking to royalty, we're speaking to young people, you see the inflection in the word, the way that words are written. And I think for me, and I know just on the top level, where it really got its hooks on me is right at the end of Act 1. Because I'm like, there was a very powerful discussion at a banquet, and this is about Martin Luther and his beliefs, and this is before the printing press, and this when the church had a lot of power. And I sat there, I'm like, okay, they got me, and now we're turning into almost like a whodunit, and I'm like, oh, I'm in. So it immediately got its hooks on me. We'll get into the nitty gritty, but yeah, man, Pentiment really impressed me. I'm glad I was wrong about it and gave it a chance, because it really got its hooks on it. We'll talk about the rest.
Are you a Pillars of Eternity fan?
I am.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that's why you were maybe attracted to Josh Sawyer as well, because I like how they have 2 different tracks in their studio.
Yes.
And learning that this game was pitched in the 90s is kind of cool too, with all the same people kind of involved in it. So, yeah, I can see, because I the only other game of his I've really played is Fallout New Vegas, which I love. And he was like, I didn't realize he was like a kid when he directed that game. He's in his 40s, I think now, right? He was probably in his 20s, like late 20s when he was like, okay. So a little bit of a wonderkind in some way. Although now that you're in your 40s or 50s, I guess you can't be called that anymore. And I like that Obsidian did greenlight this. And I was looking at the timeline of like when this was kind of entered pre-production and all of that. And it was before Xbox purchased them when they kind of greenlit it. But I give Xbox a lot of credit for letting them continue and identifying that, as far as I understand, that it's perfect for Game Pass. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I spoke to him. He's slick. He strong-armed Xbox into this game, because this was not initially pitched, and he knew during the acquisition period that this was his only shot, because he knew they were going to try to acquiesce and be happy to make this thing go through. He kind of admitted, like, I kind of strong-armed this situation to make this happen. Otherwise, this game would not have been made.
Yeah, that's good for him, man. Yeah, I don't think you're going to get games like this out of them anymore, out of any of the studios anymore, just because I don't think it's just, and you saw that with Hi-Fi Rush even when they had all these players, but it just doesn't satiate some weird bean counter need. You can't quantify it, by sales numbers. And it's like, well, how do we know? And who interacted with it? And it's like, I feel bad for guys that want to make games like this, because it seems like this is the perfect place for it. And yet it seems like that's not what they want, So it's very smart on him, because not only did he probably make millions of dollars when the studio was purchased, because he was a higher up there that probably got, a nice contract to stay. Yeah, but he got to make his kind of dream game. And that's always cool to hear about someone that pitched something and kind of let it go and kind of re-entered the trenches, did what he wanted to do, and then kind of brought it back. And I respect that a lot, man. And it's really, really cool. I'll be interested to see what he does next. Pentiment 2. I doubt. Micah, high level thoughts. You played it on Switch. You hadn't played it on Xbox. You're an Xbox person, but you didn't play it over there. It came to Switch. I think it's perfect on Switch in some sense. It does run at 120 frames on PlayStation 5, but no one noticed. I didn't even notice until I beat it, and then I read that. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't even think that was perceptible to the human eye, but fair enough. But Switch is a perfect place for something like this, because it's story driven. I always feel like just graphic novels, adventure games, like Phoenix Wright, Apollo Justice, Professor Layton, all that kind of shit just fit. Danganronpa, all that shit fits on handheld. So this, I think I liked seeing you play this on Switch, but you played it kind of silently. I watched you play it a little bit when it was on TV, but you usually play it handheld. And then you watched me play it quite a bit when I was playing on PlayStation. So you have a lot of experience with this game. What are your high level thoughts?
Oh, yeah. So first, playing it on handheld was the perfect experience. I'm a huge visual novel fan. Back in the day, Vita was my favorite place to play visual novels, and still, of course, is. There's excellent ones that I plan to go back to and get, on there. But Switch, just handheld, it's perfect for adventure type games like this, narrative heavy games, little exploration. It's one of those games that playing on a smaller screen really doesn't hamper you at all, because while the game is very pretty to look at, I love the art style, it's very simple. You know, you're really not missing anything. It doesn't look blurry like my beloved Xenoblade Chronicles does. And I'm just like, I'm putting up with this, but it really doesn't look great. Pentiment looked fantastic on Switch. It ran just fine. This is one of those games that, yeah, it's perfectly compact enough to play on something like Switch. My very highest level thoughts, I just loved the story. I loved all the characters you get to meet. I think they did a really great job from the beginning, sort of setting you up with these people are your friends so that you form a little more attachment to certain people in town. And then you kind of feel like throughout the game, like these are the trustworthy people. You can just kind of already have that foundation. Whereas sometimes in games, you're trying to figure out, why are we together? How's this all work? They really kind of seamlessly put you into this world and just said like, okay, these are the people you're close to. And you kind of feel that kinship right away. You feel that, you know, Andreas is trying to help these specific people out type deal. And then it also fosters later on some of the suspicions. Once, as Cog's mentioning, when we get to some of the whodunit type stuff, it's like, well, I don't know this guy very well. The story can go so many different directions based off the player's perception of the relationships you have with the different villagers. And it was just so well done. It's like so incredibly well done for, as Colin mentioned, it's a game where so many different outcomes are possible. There really isn't one that's like, oh, you got like the bad ending type deal. There's a million ways this could go, but they all feel valid. They all feel like legitimate endings, in my opinion. And that was part of the satisfaction of this game. And even watching multiple playthroughs of it, because it's like every kind of outcome that we got, I was like, man, like that one was just as good as the first one. So, no, fantastic. I admit, yeah, I play a lot of games on Xbox, less so these days just because I love the handheld situation on Switch. But this was one that I was almost bummed I didn't get to it sooner. But of course, like Switch was the preferred way for me to play this. It was just a fantastic game that I originally said, oh, I'll probably play this for like an hour a day. And much like COG, I couldn't put it down. I ended up burning through this game so quickly. When I originally said this will be like a bedtime game, you play for an hour a night to get through it, this ended up being my main game. And that week that I played it, I just like could not get away from it.
Well, if you like your handheld situation, and I know you do, I think Xbox will have something for that ass real soon. I think PlayStation will too, but I think Xbox will go first. And that'll be interesting to see how if that shifts the paradigm. I think it will. Like even just using Portal, which is just a mirror of PlayStation 5 locally, is amazing. And I think the Steam Deck awoke, well, Switch certainly, but the Steam Deck, I think specifically awoke something in the HD twins where they were like, actually, we could make a handheld maybe. I think people just kind of put it out of sight, out of mind. Like you can't have one. It's not going to work. And I think maybe having these unified platforms will make things a little bit differently. So I think, Micah, you'll be playing more on Xbox in the coming years. Okay. Well, my high level thoughts, I've already said a little bit about this, but I like that the game in a real brisk 12 hours for most people, 13, 15 hours if you're really thorough. Again, I'm a dummy with shit like this and I was fine. So no worries out there for taking a lot of time. I think that what I loved about it the most, first of all, Andreas Mailer is wrong about everything, right? Like it's really interesting when you think about it, right? Would you like, he's accusing people that didn't do anything wrong. You can't really get out of those situations. And he's kind of dishonorable with his wife. This whole situation with his son. Yeah. He kind of hides away and kind of shirks responsibility in the third act, and you find out about him later, which I love that, by the way. I was surprised by that. I really was. Shift. I had no idea that he was really alive and all that. I loved that. But I think so there's really deep character work with Andreas, which I think is really cool. And I want to get into all of that because he's incredibly deep for how little you really know him. But you get a really good grasp of him. I love the customization, the really subtle customization of like what you know and kind of the kind of person you are and how it gives you these subtle choices. And as I played the game, I played it all the way through twice. And then I played it again on the first act to get some more trophies that I was missing. I got the platinum trophy in it, nice. Which was really a pleasure, actually. There's so much in the game you can miss that I was even showing Micah things that she didn't know existed and things that I was seeing my third playthrough where I was like, what? Like entire sections, like the girls in the lake or going over the body with the brother. And like, there's like so many, I was like, this is so cool. And you really cannot see it all in one playthrough. And I would argue maybe not even two. I did use an achievement walkthrough my second time through. And so it brought you to a lot of different things, and shout out to that achievement walkthrough. It was great. But even then it wasn't a complete picture of the game. But I think what I love the most about it is how thematic it is. It's about arranged marriages. It's about class and money. It's about economics and the haves and the have-nots. It's about mysticism and paganism versus religiosity. It's obviously about Catholicism and Protestantism. And what's so interesting about that is that the Reformation is almost like the least important thing in the game. You almost think that that's what it's going to be about. And it ends up not being about that. And by the way, I don't know, Micah just disappeared. We have the dishwasher repairman coming, and I don't know if she... What? All right, what happened?
He's going to be here in 25 minutes.
So now he called you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that's about.
So, all right. So our dishwasher broke a few weeks ago now, or a couple weeks ago. So we have this warranty, and then we didn't know whose number was going to be in play. So last week the guy came over and he's like, oh yeah. And then he called me. So I've been waiting for the call. And now he's coming back and he calls her. I don't know what the fuck's going on with this guy.
What's going on now?
I'm just going to run. I'm going to put the dogs in our bedroom. He said he'll be here in 25 minutes.
Okay.
All right. I'll be right back.
Okay. That's fine.
Sounds good.
Sorry. We had the dishwasher repairman. It was just too confusing and too distracting. So we stopped and we're starting again. So anyway, Micah, what I was saying to Cog was just that I love how the game is built on thematic things like arranged marriage, class, mysticism and paganism, the Reformation, history and crime, the way they interpret themselves and things around them. I like too that I'm very prude with my fiction, but I love, like, I think sex is included in this the perfect amount, or like sexual themes. So you can seduce one of the sisters, which is kind of cool. You see the girls in the lake, which is kind of, could be like, sexy and inappropriate, I guess. And there's crime themes too. Like the Lord really raped two of the women in the village, right? They don't really ever say it explicitly. So I think it feels very, it's way before Victorian or Edwardian England, but it feels very Victorian in that presentation, where it's like not overt and not really even what any of it's about at all. It's about love of family. It's about listlessness. Andreas is having like a midlife crisis of some sort, especially in the second act. He's like completely miserable. He has like this son kind of, that he doesn't know what to do with. And he's like, it's very Last of Us like in that way, which is funny. So yeah, I think the game is really special from those points of view. And I just think it's highly playable. I love the idea of people like that don't play games playing this, although I think it requires too much gamer knowledge to know what to do. So it's not something you can just hand off to a parent or like a more casual person, which I think is disappointing. Just in like the way menus work, in getting to and from different screens, interacting with people, solving the puzzles, especially doing the mini games. Unfortunately, I feel like maybe even things like the mini games should have just been removed, or could have been removed or turned off to make the game more accessible, and just play it as a story, kind of a gateway drug for a skeptical spouse or something, Do either of you care about this time in history, the Holy Roman Empire and all this?
For me, it was interesting because I never really seen it covered like that in games. So I think, again, going back to Act 1 and the discussions, I believe the Baron comes into town and he's just like, talking about the writings and teachings of Martin Luther. And you see that in the abbot and this very discussion about, is this right, culturally right? And you see it become a very point of interest. And it's like, oh, by the way, Andreas, what do you think? And at that point, he's put on the spot, and your relationships change based on these thought processes with these characters. So I think that part was very interesting because, again, you're the master artist or whatever, and you go to the scriptorium all the time because that's how things were done at that time. And this is like, to me, the rise of Martin Luther and how kind of from what I understand, like his teachings kind of spread. And then the printing press and all that stuff came later. And that's how the overturning of the churches, you know, some of the theologies and stuff like that kind of happened. So it was very interesting to me. So that part, I think, really captivated me. I think I would also comment on another thing too, is that the thing about Pentiment that really resonated with me in conjunction with this overarching theme, the way you talk to characters, because you'll have choices and sometimes it's the way you say something. And then the game after you'll do it, you'll see like a skill check. Okay, you did this, you said this, you upset him there, you gained favor with this. And I absolutely adored that. Like it meant every discussion did have some kind of weight. Now, the other thing that I thought was fantastic, which you mentioned earlier, Collins, as far as the level of poverty, when you go to a noble's house, when you go to a peasant's house. There was one family, they were so poor, they didn't really have enough bread for everyone, and you are offered it at some point. And I thought what was dope about the game is conversationally in that time period, everything is done over a meal. And some of these great discussions about the town, learning about characters, is also learning about the mystery, can happen during these discussions. So I thought that was well done. And you can see, like, some people got just, venison. They got venison, they got wines, they got all this stuff. And some people got like just a little bit of things to offer you. And I thought that was depicted so well. So I love that aspect. I love that the, obviously we get to Act 2, the peasants, you start to see the little bit of the revolution here. You start to see that, we are not happy with being taxed and we don't feel we are being treated fairly. It's just so many themes going along. And to your point, the historic stuff is in there, but it's not overly pushed on you, but it's going on. So I've got a lot to say with that, especially with the nuns. And I don't know if you saw this scene. I believe it's Act 2. You're kind of bumbling around the Abbey. And I didn't even realize until a specific playthrough that there was a gay relationship going on between one of the priests. I was like, what? And then you've got a choice. Let them do their thing that you kind of ran into or, kind of let's talk about it kind of deal. The game has so much going on, but I definitely wanted to mention to your initial question, the whole idea of, I thought Martin Luther, his influence and how it was really kind of rejected by a lot, in the church at that time. And I just thought it was a very interesting time. I thought it was very well done, the way this game presented this stuff.
Yeah, well said. The scene you're talking about is interesting because Mike and I were talking about it kind of you're in the library and the priests come in and they're like, they meet there to liaise or whatever. And I said, I stayed put. And that was like kind of, I think, the safe thing to go. But then, Mikey, you said you confronted them, right? Or you tried to run away and they saw you, right? And it's so interesting. Yeah. And that changes like the whole, because then they'll never have the context that about them for the rest of and there's a few relationships like that. Like there's that gay relationship. And then there's one of the priests and sisters like just leaves and goes to one of the houses, like in the second act, right? Or the third act. They like kind of bounce out of the order or whatever and end up together as a couple, I guess, after the Bavarian army raids the town or whatever. Micah, do you care about the history at all? We're talking about, Germany or what will become Germany. It's not Germany yet, but the Holy Roman Empire. And that's, Switzerland and Austria, northern Italy too, parts of France at this time as well. The Holy Roman Empire is started by Charlemagne, which I only know a little bit about. And I know that it's the Napoleonic Wars that end the Holy Roman Empire. That leads to kind of the formation of Germany as we know it and Italy as we know it. And of course, the smaller countries like Switzerland and Austria. So there's like a lot of cool history here. But I have to say, I don't know much about it. When I studied history in college, I was an Americanist, as they say. So we studied Europe only as much as it connected to us.
Yeah, I don't have much like knowledge or much desire to seek out the real history of this time period. But in terms of like fiction, I absolutely love anything that's set in like, medieval times. Give me all your stories about peasants and lords and ladies, all that type of stuff. Like I had recently read Andrei Sapkowski's trilogy, The Tower of Fools, which is like a fantasy take on the Holy Wars set in the 1400s. And it was fantastic. And I adored that series. A big part of it, as Cog mentioned, a big part of it is like the meal times. That's where a lot of the gossip is shared. That's where a lot of the intrigue comes from, who you choose to have supper with type deal. So in fiction, I love this time period. I like learning about it. I like the clothes. Colin and I, we love watching, like period pieces, for example. And the costuming is huge. So I've like lately I've been reading a lot of like Jane Austen, which is set much further in history, but that early 1800s, reading about the description of the fashion, reading about the description of the meal times. I do love experiencing history through that lens, especially just how people actually lived. So this particular game was a really cool way to get to look at, what do the different meal times look like, the selections of food, the clothing, for example. I enjoy learning about this, in a kids, fun way of like, hey, here's Treasure Mountain, and we're going to learn about it through this. Here's Treasure Cove. We're going to learn math through games. That's my, best way to learn about history is through fiction, really. So I enjoyed this time period very much, but it's not something I have a real life interest in necessarily that I'm going to go read an actual like history book about.
Yeah, I find it quite complex because of all the different peoples. It's almost hard to, it's not ancient history by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one of the reasons why I don't like ancient history is not only because it's somewhat unknowable, but because it's dealing with all these component parts that don't really exist anymore. So it's hard to like frame it through a modern lens. Like you're talking about a people that don't really exist in some sense anymore. They've been scattered to the winds, and that's obviously history, time immemorial, but I have a hard time like really wrapping my head around it. The one fascinating part of the history to me here is specifically the Reformation, because I'm so fascinated by the Reformation. I'm really fascinated more by like the proto-Reformation and like the people that came even before, because Luther dies in 1546 and this game takes place from 1518 to 1543. I think the 95 Theses or whatever, 90 Theses or whatever are like the year before, so like something like 1517 or whatever. So they really framed it perfectly in there. But I also feel like it's like a red herring in some sense. It's not really what the game's about. Like it's about something deeper than that. It's actually a worry about paganism more than it's worrying about the interpretation of Christianity, which I find fascinating. But I think about Wycliffe and Waldo and like some of the English Reformation guys from even long before this. And I've been really disciplined about talking about what the role-playing game that we're slowly working on is about. And I won't tell you guys too much, but a piece of information I can give you is that my fascination with like the origins of Christianity and specifically how doctrine has been interpreted over the years and the rule sets of different sects is a major theme in the game. Especially going back to like a more ancient time in Christianity where I'm fascinated by the Council of Trent and Nicaea of Nicaea and Constantinople later on and all these kinds of things. And kind of this is how we interpret this, and it's the body of Christ, and it's Jesus did this, and this is the way we interpret that or whatever. And it's really just an arbitrary set of rules. And the Reformation was fascinating for being the first really truly organized time where people are like, wait, why are we doing it like this? Now, I come from a Catholic background and I consider myself culturally Catholic, and I think Catholicism is amazing just from the sense of it's the original thread of the church of Christianity. But it's a series of man-made interpretations over 2 centuries. And so to have the balls finally, and it's not to say Wycliffe and Waldo and all these other guys didn't, they were killed very quickly before they really had any power, but to have the balls to know that like what was probably going to happen to you, and it ended up not happening to Martin Luther and John Calvin and all those guys, but it's pretty fascinating. I mean, it's like one of the most fascinating things that's ever happened, I think, because Christianity is so central to Western society. And these guys kind of cracked the egg and said, like, why are we paying for indulgences? Why does the Catholic Church have like a gold-plated capital city? And these are reasonable questions. Even as a Catholic person, I ask myself these things too. Why are you allowed to annul marriages? And then how arbitrary and capricious that happens around this time a little later. I think, I don't know my English history too well, but with, Henry VIII, where you just saw how arbitrary it all was when he's like, nah, like I want to marry another woman. So we're just going to start the Church of England now. And that's literally the origins of this bullshit, So I love that they kind of go headfirst into that. Cog, let me ask you this. What do you think about the mysticism and kind of the paganism in the game? Mike and I were talking about this a little bit about, it's funny that in order to, over time, for evangelicals to kind of convince, the Roman, I guess the post-Roman societies, kind of the savages that were attacking Rome from the north for all those years and going all the way up to Scandinavia, they kind of just take all of their traditions and put Christian kind of plating over them. And I'm wondering what you think of that, because I think that's what the game in some sense is really about.
Yes, that's what the name of the game literally is, the game, and Pentiment, the idea of covering over, right? And to me, I thought it was extremely fascinating, because when you learn about history, whether it be Greeks, Romans, or whoever, and the society that comes before, and a lot of times it's especially in this game, I believe it's the Father Thomas character, which you find out a lot about, and the reasoning behind the influencing or the antagonizing of murders. and what you realize is, what's the motive? Why are you doing all of this? And a lot of it is to preserve the church and the traditions, because to him, them learning about the Romans before would be detrimental to the church. And whatever he could do to uphold that, which would mean, influencing murder, was done. And I thought that was super fascinating, because, to me, that's it's kind of like that, to the victor, sometimes they burn the books, they destroy the temple, and then you don't know. And then when anyone finds any remnant, that would be very counterproductive to the influence, because I think they were doing saints and sainthoods. It would basically make what they were doing kind of like a bit of a farce to the people. And it just shows you how much control that the church wanted to continue to have in this particular story. So I thought that was amazingly done. And it all came full circle. Okay, now I get why the name is called Pentiment. Now I see what we're doing here. But yeah, I would say it was extremely impactful, learning this stuff.
Michael, where do you stand on this? The level, I guess, and I think Cog agrees, is like, what's so funny is that the game seems to be pointing you towards this one thing that's the problem with how it's going to affect Catholicism or the local Catholic teachings and the way the society feels about things. And it ends up being this entirely different thing that I never really considered would still be a problem. Yet, of course it is. And you see it throughout the game with the way that they still kind of worship old gods and do old traditions. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I had discussed the idea of a central point to the game being that the peasants, they definitely consider themselves Christians. They definitely believe in Jesus. But you have ill Peter, the old man, who is like, we need to, pray to the rain god, or, we need to make sure that, our harvest will be better if we pray to this, old god that he mentions. I can't remember the name of it. But that was a big part of it, was the older generation not wanting to let these traditions go. And during these festivals, their holiday times that they had, and it's like, okay, well, we need to do this, this, and this, which is clearly pagan, but they're kind of getting a side eye from the church. But it's also like, you can't get these people to come over to your thing all at once. Like, they don't want to let go of the old ways. They're convinced that they'll have poor harvests if they do. They're concerned that they won't, make any money this year if they don't appease, this other thing they believe in. It was interesting because, we know in modern times the origins of things like, Easter eggs and all these things. Like, we understand fully why this all got adopted into Christianity, and sort of seeing it from the point of view of the people that it was happening to at that time, of course, fictionalized, but still to see it of the meshing of these two things, to see it of like, yeah, they're still worshiping their old, faith while still believing in Jesus. They're kind of getting the feel of things. It was actually maybe one of the funniest things to me was how often they, like took the Lord's name in vain, and that wasn't really a thing, like how often they would just be like, my God. And it's like, there's things I get yelled at for as a kid. And it's like, yeah, they're still figuring this out, what they should say, what they shouldn't regarding Jesus and God and all that. This is a neat point in history to explore because you do have the mix of like the mysticism and the Bible teachings. It was really cool. This is, as you said, a game where you can't see everything in one playthrough, certainly. And there's just more and more to look at every time you go through it.
Well, it's fascinating to think about living in a world where you're surrounded by really deep history, the aqueducts and all of the stuff that are there, statues, like the feet of statues that they think are other things that are like really like Apollo or whatever it actually was. And it's really interesting. And yet your life is some of these people live in practical serfdom, basically. Like their lives are so tough that you don't have the time or inclination to even wonder about what all of this stuff was or who it belonged to and why it's there. And that was what was kind of amazing about the ending, is that this whole place exists and that no one knows. And it's somewhat believable. You know, I've been reading about cave art recently because I find it really fascinating. Specifically the idea that cave art is really sophisticated, and then like it took many, 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 millennia for it to like get back to, if you think about like this era of illumination art, and then you think about like some of the horses that are drawn in the caves by fucking Cro-Magnons, like the horses are way better and like more sophisticated than any of these guys could do. And that's why I've been reading about it. But it's interesting to think as people like just stumble upon this shit in caves and caverns that really do go undiscovered. And so until like, I think one of these major cave painting places were found when like a tree fell down and like opened a hole into the ground, and people like found it. And it's like, it's kind of amazing. And so part of me feels like I have to suspend disbelief to be like, you live above these Roman ruins and all this shit. None of you know, none of you are curious about this, but then it kind of makes sense because the things truly are hidden. There's little hints to it, like the old salt mine and all the hints that kind of bring you towards what's going on there and falling into the well. But it's really not until the end that you see the true extent of it. And yet it's quite believable because these people have largely miserable lives. And it was only 500 years or less before that they were basically living as like the Vandals and all these fucking random Germanic tribes that were pagan, so it's kind of cool from that perspective, I think. And I really, really dig that that's ultimately what the game is about, because it's a head fake, in my opinion. The Reformation becomes kind of background noise, and it's more interesting to see about how other people deal with it. Like there are some people that are very devout, some people that are totally open to the change. And that feels like the real tension that was going on at that time. And of course, having some sort of like primitive printing press, because I looked up like the printing press as we know it is from 1440. So about 80 years before this, but it's very similar to the press that he has in his house. It's like one plate at a time. It's way easier than it would be to write this stuff at the Abbey, but they're still very early on. So it's kind of cool. It's like the meeting of religion and technology, but through that 16th century lens and not a 21st century lens. To set it up a little bit more for people. So the game takes place between 1518 and 1543 over 3 acts. So I think the first act is 1518. The second act, I think, is 1525. The third act, I think, is 1543, something of this nature. The town that it takes place in is called Tassing, which is fictional. And Kearsau Abbey is in the town of Tassing, which is built on Roman ruins. And that's fictional. All right, sorry, we got interrupted. Now the dishwasher man's here. Way downstairs. And I don't know what I was talking about, but let's just get into some of the characters and some of the locations and all of this. Let's start with Andreas Mahler, our artist. I'm really interested in this character. It's fascinating because I don't think he's a really good person by any stretch of the imagination. He seems, he obviously has experienced loss, and he's put into this arranged marriage, which is not pleasant, but he seems to be very curt about his wife. Even the choices you make that seem to be nicer about her make it obvious that he has no interest in going home or being around her at all. And I kind of felt bad for her the entire time. You only see her in his dreams, though. And I do love the dream sequences. They're very strange. And, I can kind of relate in some sense to the labyrinth or the maze kind of situation. I feel like I have dreams like that myself, but he's talking to, Socrates and all these random people. It's pretty interesting. But we see him in Act 1, obviously kind of an artist working on illuminations at the Kearsau Abbey. The murder happens of Brother Piero, and then who gets? Yeah, Brother Piero. Accused. It was Warren.
Well, the Baron gets murdered.
Right, Baron,
and then Piero gets accused. I believe.
Right, Piero gets accused. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And so he gets kind of engulfed in all of that. And then we see him, he kind of leaves after that. And then he comes back 7 years later. He has an apprentice boy, like a young teen boy with him. The situation in the town is somewhat deteriorated, a lot of tension between the abbey and the town, kind of attracting the eyes of the Bavarian government and the Holy Roman Empire. And there's kind of a rebellion brewing, and it's led by this guy, Otto. This guy kind of ends up being murdered. So 7 years later, you have this whole other murder situation that you have to figure out that ends even worse. And then basically, I guess almost 20 years pass after that. And you find yourself playing as Magdalene, who was just a little girl in the second act. And you think that you're just going to play as her for a while. And then you end up actually finding that Andreas is still alive, living in the remnants of the castle, like Dracula. So a pretty interesting character. We see him in different arcs, somewhat of a redemptive arc as much as it could be. But Cog, what do you think of this character and his state of mind and all the rest? So we'll get also after this into like what the choices we made were to show more of our character.
Shout out to Andreas. He's definitely a very intriguing character. First of all, shout out to all he like when he does these little reflective moments whenever he has to make either major decisions. And I thought the writing with that was really cool because one of them was like, well, why should I have to help them? Or why should I have to like he has these internal debates with himself, which is dope. And then like you said, the dream sequences, right? The dream sequences are cool in a sense. I almost look at it as if, even though I mentioned like Socrates, Charlemagne also, like I almost look at it as like, the little angel and the devil on his shoulder kind of thing. And then he's really reflective, trying to be like this master artist. In the first act, he seems very gung-ho to be about his craft and this is the path he should do. But then by act 2, he just seems tired and worn and he just seems like it's bearing. Maybe this wasn't the career path, and obviously the thing with his son, right? And that, I guess, I'm assuming tragedy or what happened, there. So I think as I got to learn more about Andreas, the character, I did like him. However, my only nitpick with the game is at the end of Act 2, it's clear with him, there's going to be a peasant revolt, right? They have had it. Obviously, after the Otto character, which is this symbiotic leader for them, we're being oppressed, we're being overtaxed. They are really not happy. And I felt like I understand like their angst towards him, that made sense. But then when they are now ready to burn down the abbey, like tensions are at its peak. I was kind of upset. There's like, okay, he's going to go back inside to save the books. And I'm like, nah, like I didn't like that. Like I and to be honest, no disrespect to Magdalene in Act 3, which I thought was a cool twist in the game to say, okay, he's died. At that point, I'm assuming Andreas is dead. So I'm just like, man, that was just kind of, I didn't like that. You know what I'm saying? Especially the reasoning for it, right? So, and then we even lost the little squire. It was Casper or whatever. I'm like, I like Casper. Now, apparently, you can save him. Apparently, you have to be a complete jerk to this kid. Like, and make him say that this is not a career for you, and then he would actually leave the town, which in a sense, he was angry at you, but it would save his life. Because I felt bad that kid went in there, because that kid helps you a lot, while you fall down the well, and you fall down certain areas. He's very resourceful. He looks up to Andreas. It was like a cool relationship. But anyway, back to the third thing, but finishing Andreas's arc. Obviously, the Magdalene, which is very influential because, like you said, Colin, you meet her as a little girl. She's actually in Act 2 as a little child, and he gives her, I believe, I forgot the book he gave her that influences her to eventually become the reason why they're going to have to do some type of mural or sculpt to try to depict Tassing's history, right? So she subtly influenced this child, but I guess for me, yes, we got the redemption arc. Yes, he was kind of living like Dracula for a while in the Abbey, doing God knows what, surviving so low. So it was cool to see him, but he is not the greatest character as far as he's got a lot of issues. He's got a lot of things going on, but I did love the way they brought it together. But Andreas, very interesting. I love I will say this about him. I do love his internal conflicts. I think that was my favorite part of the game and why he gets to the conclusion he gets to. And the last point I'll say about him is that I thought was really cool is what Pentiment does awesome, setting up his background, setting up, like, I think mine's I went with an orator, right? He's very well spoken, but I also went with hedonist. Mm-hmm. So like when I got into the bars and stuff like that, I had all types of presentation things, options and skills that allowed me to navigate certain things and make these pontifications and these speeches amongst, the people. So I thought that was cool. So, you can kind of make him your own. He does ultimately have his arc, but I love that those choices about Andreas actually can influence the game and also help you solve puzzles or skill checks with people to gain favor. I thought that was really cool too about it.
Yeah. It's we'll get into some of these choices too, because there's a lot of them, and I like how the game asks you to make them like in each act, which is kind of cool as you kind of morph your character. Micah, high level thoughts or whatever your thoughts are on the character of Andreas Mailer.
Yeah, I give him a little more grace, I think, just because he is, from the beginning, you have like his conversations with his father that they show. And his father's harping on him because he dropped out of college and he decided he wanted to be an artist. And his father's kind of really like, you can tell it's like this is his last chance to kind of prove himself. And his father keeps harping on the marriage that's arranged back home. And you have to get home for this. And you can already tell that Andreas doesn't have a lot of control over his life, which in olden times is how things went. Your parents really did dictate your entire future. In like Asian cultures especially continued on far further into the future. I'm reading, a book right now that was set in 1920s Japan. This, woman wanted to get divorced and she's like 30 years old and her father is like, I will not allow this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and he had a lot of say in whether or not his 30-year-old daughter could get divorced in the 1920s, right? So just culturally, the influence of our parents, huge. And seeing, arranged marriages and all those things, which still exist in some places in the world. But from Andreas' point of view of like his career, even everything, it's like under the, scope of his father, and he's trying to do the right thing. But you can already tell that he's sort of going down a path maybe he's not sure about. And then going through, yes, you get through to now he becomes the master artist. And he is loathing it because he's not doing the work he thought he'd be doing. These grand masterpieces, he keeps saying, are just for rich people's vanity. He keeps just highlighting to Caspar that you're not making real art. You're just making things for rich people to be proud of in their home. And it has no meaning. And he's depressed over the lack of meaning in his work. And he's not impressed with, how well actually everything turns out. He's not pleased with himself at all. He just sees himself as, I don't know, just a puppet to make things for rich people. And so when you see then the way he treats his wife, for example, clearly they lost their child, very tragic, like genuinely sad. I was genuinely sad through those dream sequences when you slowly find out what has happened. And his poor wife is miserable. They clearly have this huge rift between them because of it. But he's deeply flawed, makes a lot of mistakes, clearly. But just this guy from the get-go seems to just have not a lot of control in his life. Then he starts to feel like everything is going the wrong way. And here he is. He finally became the master artist he always wanted to be. And it's not what he pictured at all. So I kind of like the way it all turned out. I agree with Cog. As soon as he ran into the burning, library, I was like, what are you doing? Like, don't do that. Like, get out of there. I was very upset that was a choice like you didn't get to make. But of course, the payoff later of finding out that he had truly now escaped all his responsibilities, stopped being the master artist. Who knows what happened to his wife at this point? The man was just living in a hovel for 20 years, secluded. It was a very interesting start to finish of you go from this young artist to this man taking refuge in a derelict building for 20 years and just how he got there. The whole time I was like, what is going to happen next? They did an excellent job with me caring about this person, even through the decisions I thought he made that were very poor, like abandoning his wife. I still was rooting for him to come full circle and do the right thing type deal.
It's funny because I just I totally understand your interpretation of him, and I think that that's a totally reasonable way to interpret it. But to me, I think the game constantly reminded you through the actions of others and through the words of others and how they treated you at times, where it's like your problems are so trivial compared to the greater problems that are people around you, that you really, the woe is me kind of shit is kind of lame. And I feel like the game makes you feel that way in some sense. I guess specifically depending on how other people speak to you and how you let them speak to you. But it's like, yeah, your son died, and you're in an arranged marriage, yet your wife is also in the arranged marriage and doesn't necessarily want to be in it either. And her kid also died, you know?
Oh yeah.
And it's like, and you just like run away from her, you know?
Yeah. And you're presented with how the peasants live. Like, they lose children too. They have, they don't have enough to eat some years, and they're just carrying on, with life. Whereas Andreas is, like you said, very woe is me. It is just, I had great sympathy for him, partly because he seems like the type he's trying to do the right thing. Like in solving the murders, for example, as you said, he has a lot of like misconceptions along the way. You don't even know if he's doing things right, but he's trying to do the right thing. But at the same time, you're like, man, just take your nose out of this. Why are you getting involved? Well, you're just some visiting artist. You're trying to solve the town murder. Like, what is going on here? How big is your ego that you think, oh, these peasants can't handle it, I'm going to fix it? But he is trying to do the right thing when he sees that this old monk has been accused of a murder and he cannot let it stand. That he's like, no, I'm not going to let the wrong guy get, grabbed for this. But then in reality, did you still let the wrong guy get grabbed for it, but you just saved your friend type deal?
Right. It's at best morally gray, which I think is interesting. It actually kind of is reminiscent of the way Fallout New Vegas was, in terms of there was good and bad, and certainly, but the decisions you made were very nebulous, and you didn't really know to what end you were working, or to who you were helping, and what faction you would be with, and all the rest. So there's a little bit of an echo here with that. Cog, you were bringing up earlier kind of the decisions you made. I brought up, where is it? Here it is. So in Act 1, you have a series of decisions to make. Mm-hmm. It says your wandering years, Wonderhar, is a time period in which journeyman artists or this is from the Pentiment wiki, by the way. Journeyman artists or craftsmen like Andreas would travel away from home in order to learn new skills and gain new experiences. Andreas picks one area where he took his Wonderhar. So Basel, Flanders, and Florence were the decisions. I have no reference to like what I even chose here, or what the outcomes, I guess, would have been for these. But do you guys remember the choices you made, Micah?
I'm pretty sure I chose Florence because I was like, oh yeah, it'd be useful, I felt, for some reason, if he spoke Italian. And then I know for sure I chose the background in medicine, which hurts you later on in its own way because it makes the town doctor dislike you because he sees you as like a threat. You would think that he would befriend the doctor because you're both men of medicine. In reality, he sees you as like a hack. So like this like very early decision has such a huge difference later. But I know I chose, I think, Florence, and being like medicine inclined. I also chose the option that made you like recognize plants, whether it's like a naturalist or something. The option that made you recognize plants and herbs easily. Those were my initial choices. I steered clear of anything that had to do with him being involved like in the occult, because I was like afraid of the church. From a very early place, I was like, I'm scared of the church. There's no way I'm going to choose that he's like the occult guy, even though I kind of wanted to. But I was like, no, I'm not getting into that. Who knows what they'll do to me? Interesting.
Do you, Cog, do you remember your Wonderhar, if Basel, Flanders, or Florence? I definitely didn't take the one that spoke Italian because when the Italian scholars visit the doctor and you talk to them in the bar, did you guys get that scene? Like you're upstairs in the
Yes.
inn. I couldn't understand them.
Yeah, I think I did choose it. I did understand it. Yeah, I think I chose Italian. I think I did because I remember that scene and being able to converse with them. So yes, I believe I did that. What's the other skill checks? We have the
So background is, so there's other, because it's background, master's degree, and favorite subjects. Those are the three other things you choose in Act 1. So the background was hedonist, craftsman, bookworm, rapscallion, and businessman.
Definitely did hedonist. I remember that.
Me too. I did hedonist as well. So like my whole, I mean, it makes sense to talk about it all at once, I guess, is my whole arc was like, I was a hedonist And then I was into imperial law. Oh no, I'm sorry. For this playthrough, it was theology for my master's degree, and then favorite subject was the occult.
You did the occult.
Yeah,
okay.
because I thought it'd be cool. So I'm a heavy drinking, womanizer. I have like this real great knowledge of religion and of like the occult aspects of religion and like the good and the bad or whatever. And I just was kind of making my own character in my head in that way. When I played the second time through with the achievements, I think I did, because for the choices you need, I did imperial law, and I think heavens and earth was the second one.
Mm-hmm.
So you chose hedonist.
Yep.
And you know what I chose? I chose rapscallion the second time through as well here. That lets you cheat at the card game in the second act, which is kind of cool.
Really?
And other things as well. But yeah, you can like straight up just cheat at it and win. There's like a whole mini game where like the guy's eyes are on you and off of you, and then you like when he's off of you, you can like stack the deck, and then he like goes and looks at it. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
So yeah, all right. So you were the hedonist, and then for master's degree, you chose theology.
Yes.
Right. And then for favorite subjects, you chose orator.
Right? Yes, definitely.
And actually, we choose two of those, right? Because there's a second one. I think you get to choose like your second option two out of those five, and I think I chose logician, Latinist, logician, orator, occultist, and heavens and earth.
Yes,
are the favorite subject options. Micah, what did you pick in that? And you said a little bit, but you spoke French, right? Or no, Italian, right?
Yeah, I did. I remember just the rough choices I made. So I know I spoke Italian. I chose an interest in medicine. And I definitely chose when it came to
your master's degree is medicine, and then
and I chose something related to being like a naturalist of some kind, because there was the whole thing where he recognized herbs and he was constantly pointing out flowers and herbs and stuff, and that played in later.
That's heavens and earth. I think it says Andreas knows a great deal about the constellations, heavenly bodies, and their movements. He is also familiar with various plants and animals from study and personal experience.
Yeah, that would be that one then. Yeah. And so because I was as interested as I was to see like what happens if you kind of turn this guy into like a heretic, but I was like, no, I don't want to get burned alive. Like I had zero knowledge of what was going to happen in the game. So I was like, you're not burning me at the stake. No, thank you. I wasn't going to deal with that.
Do you remember what your background was? The hedonist, craftsman, bookworm, rapscallion, or businessman?
I probably chose either craftsman or bookworm. Like I really was playing this like I'm just a nerdy little artist. I'm just a good little boy.
It says Andreas. Bookworm is Andreas lives to work and dedicates all his time to his art. So that's probably what you chose. Because
while you were trying to make this medieval Don Draper, I was just trying to be a good little boy.
Yeah. Fair enough. I loved these different choices. I thought it was really cool. It gives the game like inherent replay value, and I will just say that I think the replay value is pretty significant.
Yes.
It's a game that really should be played twice with intentionally different choice making. Maybe you can even do, and you would appreciate this, Cog, like a Mass Effect style Paragon and Renegade 2 playthroughs, but it's a little bit different because none of them are like overtly evil. I keep bringing up on Sacred Symbols. I love the scene in Mass Effect when you're playing as a renegade and you punch the woman for a portion in the face. And I always play as like a male shepherd. So he just decks this chick.
Yes.
And I'm like, holy shit. You don't have anything like that, but that's laugh out loud funny. That's good shit. So shout out to them for this. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to mention in terms of replay, something I had brought up to you, Colin, was I do wish that there was like a new game plus mode that allowed more frequent saving. Because when you play something like a visual novel, for example, saving often is part of the game so that you can reload certain choices. And you'll have 20 save files so you can say, oh, I want to go back to 2 chapters back, make a different choice, see how it plays out from there, versus having to start the whole game from scratch again. Just because this is a long enough game that I feel like it does, for me, hamper some of the want to replay it of like, well, it is about 12 hours and you only get one chance to make this choice. You can't go reload the save and try again just to see what's different, Well,
you might be disappointed to learn this because I only learned this because it's not obvious when I looked it up. The game saves your last 8 autosaves. So if you can count back, the game saves whenever you enter a new screen. So if you can just count back 8 screens, that's like as much choice as you have. And if you have to like go into your save file and hit triangle, and then it brings them all up. And I only knew that because you have to do it in the in the achievement guide that I use, where you have to go 3 saves back or whatever at this specific time. So it's annoying that to not know that. You could, but the game doesn't save after choices; it saves after you go to the next screen. So you could also kind of get pretty deep as long as you're kind of flying close to the sun. But you can kind of like get pretty far in, make choices, and then back out by just hitting, by going back to the menu. So should you ever go to play it again?
That's still not simple enough. No, I'm talking about a visual novel that I can save right before a choice. If I don't like it, reload the save. Like, I don't want to finesse anything. I'm not trying to cheat the game into doing things it's not supposed to do. Like, I just wish it had, you played through it once the way we wanted you to. Now you can save as often as you want, experience the different choices without playing it through 4 times. Because that's just not what I have interest in doing. I do want to see different choices, but not necessarily get 5 hours in, say, I don't really like where this is going, I guess I'll start over. I'd rather be able to reload maybe the last hour of gameplay and go from there. So I do still wish that was a feature, even if you can sort of cheese it a bit. I just wish it was easy to do.
Yeah, I would have loved, I brought up Quantic Dream earlier. One of the things I loved about Detroit Become Human was the visualization of the butterfly effect, which has never really been seen in a game like that before. And I wish that there was some sort of, that should be like, for games of the highest quality like this, in that particular subgenre, I would love to see something like that where you can kind of just look at a huge flow chart, just back out and just see it. There's something like that.
Yeah, you would like, which I think is on PlayStation now, As Dusk Falls. As Dusk Falls does it beautifully, and it will even allow you to see, it'll be grayed out, but it'll allow you to at least just see a grayed out box of another path that could have happened at these branching, decisions. And it's an extensive flow chart. I think both of you would love As Dusk Falls. And it's actually a game that you can play cooperatively. And you could say, Colin can say, hey, I want to make this decision. Oh, actually, it's the perfect game for you for other reasons. I just thought about it. You guys need to play As Dusk Falls. This is my now, infomercial for multiple reasons. As a couple, and regarding, and also race is involved, and choice, and very important consequence. Highly recommend. You will get your flow chart. Trust me, you'll love it.
Yeah, no, I'll write that down. We were just talking on Sacred about finding co-op games to play, like being more willing to play co-op games, and I'm like, I feel like it really is like a way out sort of stuff, and Overcooked and shit, and it's something a little bit different.
Yeah, different because both of you will be able to have an overwrite system. Like, you have a certain amount of chances to overwrite the other person when you feel strongly about a point. So it's the perfect couples game.
That's cool.
Multiple people can play.
And then from there, eventually we're going to have it set up that I'll be upstairs playing Gears Online, Colin will be downstairs. We'll be in the same lobby together on the headset. We'll get there, Cog. We're going to get there.
Relax. We got to work on it. Give the man time. He's playing Pentiment now. This is progress.
Yeah, I think I'll play Hi-Fi Rush as well at some point, but I'm not going to play the other two. They're not for me. Grounded actually is a really cool idea, also from Obsidian.
Yeah.
They seem to be like the test bed, because I imagine the Outer Worlds 2 is going to come to PlayStation as well. So they seem to be kind of more multi-platform than the other studios in some sense. And that makes sense because they have a lot of experience making games for different platforms. Let me see here. Okay, so what do we think? I have to visit this topic, although I brought this up in other instances. I love old crime and just how easy it is to get away with things. Like, you have no chance of catching who did. It's so interesting when you think about it. Like, how do you really catch someone and prove that they are guilty if they say they didn't do it? You catch the person who killed this Baron, but you can't look at his fingerprints. There's no DNA testing. You can't track his phone. There's no cameras. Like, if he really says he didn't do it, you have to have some sort of really compelling way, or I guess just ignore reality in some sense. I think a lot of people probably got killed for no reason back in the day. It still happens.
Oh yeah.
So I was just compelled by the kind of Renaissance level crime solving, where it really just requires you to kind of savvily talk at people and connect dots, but you never really know, and it's borne out because you're not right, about who killed the different people. So I wanted to shout that out. By the way, did you guys ever expect that the guy that was the father the entire time? I never really knew what to expect until everything kind of happened. So
yeah, I didn't see it with Father Thomas, but when it was revealed, it made so much sense, and I was just like, okay, this is a person who literally hears everyone's in the town's confessions, knows everyone's darkest secrets, and has the proper motivation to do it. But then on like a brief replay in the beginning, and now I'm looking at the character with the side eye, there were little subtle hits, but I missed them. I definitely missed them. So yeah, and to your point earlier, I want to give you credit because that's also the beauty of it. When Pentiment becomes this whodunit, you do realize, again, there's no forensics. That you have no true evidence to really make this, grand decision. And the fact that time is really against you, that you do not have enough time to speak to every single person because of the day-night cycle of the game, right? And getting as much as you can. And I think for me, with the first murder with the Baron, I believe I chose the friar, the one that was kind of like scribbling and doing some little shisty things with the artwork in the abbot. And his story didn't add up to me a lot of times, but people were getting murdered unjustly in this game. Like you realize in this time period, because of the lack of technology, because of the lack of real crime and problem solving, like a lot of mistakes and people horribly lost their lives in this time period. So I thought that was evident. And even in the second one with the Otto murder, trying to figure that out. So yeah, good point by you in that respect, because you truly, as Andreas, you're going on hunches, you're going on feeling, you're not making truly informed decisions with enough proof to say definitively it is this person. And I think I love that about the game. And then last point I want to say is I like the little tension of those notes started to scare me. I don't know after why. Like, I'm like, wait a minute, we're 7 years old and this is still going on. So like, wow, this person, what they call it, the thread puller. Like, I love that name, the thread puller. Like, there's literally a person behind the scene influencing everything. And I thought that was over after Act 1. He's going to go into a different route. But yeah, I thought that was really well done in that respect with Pentiment.
It's reasonable to think that it would go in its own direction after Act 1 too, because something Mike and I asked her about was like that there's a scene early on when you're talking to like the shepherd or whatever in the meadow and the aqueducts in the background, and a ghost like apparition jumps over the thing or whatever. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what was that? Like, now it is cool because that is a reference to a part of the game you get to later where you do jump over a part of the aqueduct and you realize that's where you are, which is kind of neat. And you do have to do like a kind of an acrobatic jump to get over the thing with your partner, or your apprentice. But or no, actually, it's with Mags at that point when you're doing that, I think. And so I just there are some head fakes where I'm like, oh, I guess that's just to kind of show that maybe it's a little ghostly and there's a lot of spirits and build up the mysticism, but it doesn't really matter because that's like a really strange scene when you think about it through the context of the game. It's the only truly supernatural thing you see in the game at all.
Yeah, good point. I got a little tension every time I was in the caves or in the aqueducts underground because, you search and you try to figure things out. That's where a little, like some minor little horror tropes and mysticism kind of creeped into your point. I agree.
I also dug, and I said before that one of the things I love about this is like class and the economics and how there's really 3 strata, maybe 4 if you think about it. So like the peasantry, serf-like person, the craftsman, the nobility / the, I guess the brothers and like the religious orders or whatever. And I guess there's like some upper class, like the mill owner might even be amongst that third class. So I love that they represent this geographically. There's a really cool scene that seems subtle and unimportant in the beginning of the game, but when you play the game again, you realize, oh, this is actually more important, which is when there's like bad rain and the flooding happens where the Abbey just dumps it's not doing it on purpose, and they even say as much, but they're in the high ground. So the water's just dumping into their farm and fucking everything up. And you kind of just forget about it, or at least I did. And Peter's actually in that scene, which is interesting because he's the one that kind of goes crazy later in Act 2 for like with everything that goes on. But I love that there's just like subtle nods that are really, I think, demand people play it twice, knowing what happens playing it. It's a different experience and a pretty cool experience. Are there any characters, Micah, that stick out to you that you want to talk about? There are a few that I think are interesting. I love the blacksmith just because there's like a full circle thing. If you encourage him to go find love.
Yes.
You find that he's kind of like lonely, right, in the first act. And then I think in the second act, you discover that he met a woman at a market or something. And then so like you can convince her to go and find her. And then I think in the ending, you see that he has like a bunch of kids ultimately, right, which is kind of cool. So I like that character a lot. I like the old woman that's like really embittered, and you find out that the Baron like beat the shit out of her husband for no reason. And you can actually accuse her and have her. She's actually a character that's pretty interesting because you can have her murdered, I think, in the first, or like executed in the first act. And then in the second act, you can either choose to like help her or not. And then she'll be in the third act in her house, or like the pair of brother and sister that kind of abscond and leave from the Abbey go and live in that house. So there's a lot of cool threads with some of these characters, but I will say there's so many characters that I can't keep them all straight. I don't think, especially when you get into some of the more obscure brothers and the sister characters, especially. And I think this comes from the fact that they all kind of read the same, unfortunately. And since it's not voice acted, nor do I think it should be, because I think it really reads beautifully the way it does. It makes it a little harder to mince through them than say the townspeople.
Yeah, absolutely. What stuck out to me the most, and this goes back to like the bias of who I accused for the murders, was the people I disliked. And it was like, if you said one wrong thing to me, I'm going to accuse you of murder, which is why like the first time around, I said Lucky did it because Lucky was very mean to me. Now, I only found out later that he had a very hard life and I felt real bad, but you shouldn't have been rude. So I said that you were the murderer. And then in the second act, and I was like, well, you know, this Miller guy, he's really mean. And I accused his wife. And so like half of my choices for who I said did the murders was like, oh, I don't like this guy one bit. And it proves that it's a good thing I don't live in medieval times, because I would just be pointing out my neighbors left and right, like he did it, you know, and there's no phone records or whatever to say that he didn't do it. I would have been killing people all over the place back then. Because that's what stuck out to me the most was, I had characters I really liked, such as the blacksmith. I was like, you got to go find love. You got to go find love. You're a really nice guy. I was like hyping him up. I was like, I'll be your wingman, whatever. That was cool. And of course, as I said, it sets you up to really like the Drucker's Claus, you know, in particular. You feel like really close to this guy. You know, he's the one that has the printing press in his house. And so there's just really cool stuff there. But it was the characters that I didn't like that stuck out the most to me, of like, I can't stand this dude and I'm going to get rid of him, you know, or being like the Miller, for example, finding out that his son likes art and he, you know, beats him for wanting to draw. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to help this little guy out, aren't I? You know, like I'm going to get rid of your dad. So I don't know. My bias really kicked in when I was like, you were mean to me one time. I shall never forget this. You know, I had my own little Count of Monte Cristo moment playing through this game.
I remember that character, like that's the one you have the option to go his shooting or with his hunting or with his dad. And yeah, he was really mean to the kid and like to devalue art and you would secretly, you know, kind of help him. You could encourage him, you know, in terms of that. But the kid's like, all right, keep it on, you know, my dad doesn't like it. And I believe if I'm correct, that's the same character. His wife or someone's having an affair. This town got a whole bunch of dirt. Like everyone's doing stuff. And I love it. That's the great thing about being in one town that kind of evolves over a period, right? And you get to see all these different relationships and stuff. But I remember that son character specifically. I remember the dad and I remember the wife, and there was some tryst going on and that I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, he was cheating on his wife with the innkeep's wife.
Yes.
And so I accused her because I was like, you're bad people. And so I was just like, you did it. And I had like my other little reasons, which watching Colin's, you know, other playthroughs, I was like, oh yeah, I got that wrong. But I didn't feel bad about it because I was like, you're bad people. And now the Miller's wife will be happy and his son will be happy. I'm like, this all worked out. I did a good thing. I let the murderer get away, but I did the right thing.
Yeah, shout out for Colin mentioning the older, bitter woman there. Yeah, she didn't like the Baron as soon as he came in. I was like, what is this about? So it felt very easy to want to accuse her, but I did let her live. I did see a playthrough when she gets executed. I was like, damn, that was brutal. But she was fighting to the end. Like she was still talking like the way she was talking. So yeah, fun character.
It's fun to bring up the Miller too, because he's a sociopath, that dude. He's crazy. The hunting scene is really cool, where he shoots the gun off near your ear.
Yes.
And you can opt to shoot the deer or not shoot the deer. There's trophies attached to that, so I did it both ways. I think he basically calls you a bitch if you don't do it. But it's interesting. I'm fascinated by the level of character work put into this world, and it's deep. It's tough to write shit like this. I can imagine. I was really impressed, by the way, with how small the team was and how they really made or did a lot of work with very few resources, which I thought was pretty cool. Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, you know what, Cog, you brought up something earlier, and it's in my notes here, which is the meals. I really do love this aspect of the game. All right, we stopped and started again because the dishwasher repairman is now gone, and the dishwasher is repaired. So you guys were here throughout the entire experience. Isn't that exciting? All right, so what I was saying was that I really love the meals, and you had brought this up earlier, Cog. Subtle way to show class, maybe again not so subtle sometimes, but indicative. And you said this earlier, which I thought was great, which was like, this is the way people communicated. They were busy. They weren't just dicking around doing nothing for the most part. It was like kind of unheard of. What I love about the game, or one of the things I think, so I keep saying that, but one of the things I think is really cool about the game is that to kind of be with anyone or to kind of get information out of people, you have to kind of work with them. A lot of people are not just standing around. If they are, it would be unusual. So you're kind of spinning with the women, the wool. You can make the Christmas cookies in Act 3, which is kind of cool for the entire town. You do this, you do that. It's pretty neat. So what did you like about the meals, and what order did you eat in? Because I tried to eat in the it didn't ever matter, but I tried to eat in the Cajun way. If they gave you like a piece of bread, I ate the bread first. Then I ate like the soup or like porridge. Then I ate the hard meat. If they gave you cheese, I ate the cheese kind of early. I've seen some of the desserts, like the plum cake in one of them when you're eating with the priest. Say that for last. So talk to me a little bit about the eating in the game.
Yeah, the eating is the best part. I think, again, such a subtle nod to class and living conditions. And I think for me, for order, I always go with the main, like if it's a herring or a venison, I went with the big meal first. Then I probably did my little soups and stuff like that. I kind of did bread and stuff last, but I forgot somebody had dessert. I think it was the
yeah. They have like a plum cake or something like that. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is luxury over here. Like, and I think his was the only one. There was actual leftovers. Like they had so much. And what's funny is, I'm like, man, like eating with you, and you see the stark difference while the rest of the townsfolk are kind of, they're struggling a bit. So yeah, I like that. But I also love you could get clues conversationally with who you chose to dine with, or just get a little bit more context on certain characters and relationships. Plus you get the gossip, you get the in-town gossip between people. So order of food, I kind of kept it basic, main meal, and then a little side thing, and then probably bread last. But like I said earlier, one of the things that really resonated me, I forgot what family it was, but they literally really didn't have enough for us as a guest.
Yeah, it's the family you stay with in the first act, isn't it? You're with them in the second act, I think, and he says something like, well, Casper realizes that they have bread. You can say to him, like, it's because they are being nice to their guests. And then Casper tries to give his bread back, and the guy yells at him. Or whatever. Yes. He says, I'll not have people talking about how I can't feed my guests or whatever.
Yes. And was that the older guy? Who was that barked on?
It was Peter, the guy who ends up like being a fucking suicide bomber later on in the act. He's really losing his mind.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that was it was a powerful scene. I really enjoyed it. But again, you got the choice. That's the other thing too. You could pick so many people that you interact with. And another point you made, Colin, which is good, is that, sometimes you are working with these people, they're not just sitting around. They are doing their day-to-day life, and you can choose to engage it. I forgot his name was like Big something. I forgot his name. It was a bigger
Big York.
Yeah, Big York. Yeah, and I was rocking with him one time and doing stuff. It's just like, okay, what's the work for the day? Kind of thing. It just, I don't know. It's just something about it that made it feel very communal, and it made it was just fun to be a part of this town. You really get attached, and I think that's the beauty of a game staying in one area and having time period lapse. Also, I thought that also contributed to it.
Yeah. Well, where are you on this, Micah? What order are you eating in? Did you want to try to not eat and leave some of the food for the poor people around town. You're not allowed to do that. You have to eat.
No, I like that Cog went proteins first. Very on brand for him. Proteins first, save the carbs for last.
Right.
Yeah, I was similar to Colin, taking this from like a very modern approach of like, oh, we get our Texas Roadhouse rolls. I'll eat that first. A little cheese, okay,
Right.
you know, and then going through that way. The meal times were awkward in the sense that here another way, you know, that portrayed class, you know, Andreas is clearly very used to you just invite yourself in. Just saying, like, he would just be like, I'd like to have lunch with you, and they're like, okay. They don't refuse. They're not inviting you. Occasionally they'd invite you to dinner. Occasionally they'd be like, have you had supper yet? Do you want to eat with us? But so often the prompt would come up and he'd say, I need to have dinner with someone. And he'll just walk into someone's house and be like, can I eat with you? And the assumption that they'd have enough food shows where he came from versus where he is now in this town of like, you're just inviting yourself into these people's house and there's not enough bread for everybody. Like, you're literally just taking their food that they did not offer. You just invited yourself in. First of all, that's just like the complete opposite of how I live my life. Colin and I were talking about how we order at restaurants. Colin is extremely polite, but he orders with confidence. And I said, the way I order my food is, I'd like a hamburger, please, if you don't mind. It's okay if you say no, I'll just eat nothing. Like, that's basically me talking to the waitress, be like, it's okay, you don't have to bring me anything. I'll have the water. You can take the water even. It's fine. And so to have to invite yourself into people's house, you're eating their food. There's clearly certain people are struggling more than others. And you kind of realize, I wish I hadn't eaten at this guy's house because I feel bad. Like, because this guy offered me a sardine and half a piece of bread and he's not eating anything. And I feel guilty now. Like, that whole dynamic, really cool. And just the way it made me feel so awkward inside. It's like I really was putting these people out. I loved every mealtime, you know, event in the game. Those were fantastic to experience, even the ones that were like painfully awkward.
Yeah, I think Cog brought it up earlier, and it was just at the top of our podcast where it's just like, this is the way you experience a lot of the game is over meals, and I love that. It's so clever. This is all a game about talking. So giving people as many different ways to talk. It's like I don't know enough about cinema to know what it's called, but it's the idea that like people very carefully write what people just are trivially doing in scenes in order so that they're not just standing there facing each other talking, like a person's packing a suitcase or doing the dishes. And it's just like clever things like that, very small, that make places feel lived in. And this is the same thing with that combined with all the mini gaming. Again, I don't think the game really needed the mini games, like when you're helping the blacksmith in the beginning and all that. I'm glad it's pretty seldom. I wonder if that's something that they wanted to do, or if it's something where they're like, guys, gotta do something like, you know, make the game a little meatier. I think it would have been fine without those things. And yeah, just getting to speak with everyone and the impropriety that can come with that, like how quickly you can seduce the sister Zedna or whatever. And I will say one character that I didn't like, and people are going to roll their eyes at this, but I wasn't crazy about this brother Sebet guy from North Africa or whatever.
Oh, the Ethiopian.
Yeah. I felt like this reminds me a little bit of Kingdom Come Deliverance, right? Where there were like an Ottoman trader or something in there, like there weren't anyone. Someone saying like, well, there's like evidence that Ottomans went up there and traded or whatever. And they're like, yeah, but nonetheless, in this 1 square mile of this place in 1318, there are just simply no black people in it. Sorry. Like, and when I saw Sabat I didn't mind his character until it was over, because you meet him and he's in the Abbey or whatever, and you can have lunch with him, and actually you dine with him and a bunch of the women and children. And he shows him like he has like this beautiful illuminated Bible and all this kind of stuff. But like he plays no role in the game at all. Is one of the only characters really that you meet that doesn't play any role. And when I found that he wasn't there anymore and then it was never mentioned ever again, I'm like, come on, dude, this seems like you put this here so that people wouldn't complain that there were no people of color in the game. That's the way it came off to me, but only at the end, because it kind of felt very natural in the beginning until you realize, but why are we doing all of this? And why are we talking about the Ethiopian church and showing the Bible, and the kids are saying these guys are black, and that's the way it just seemed very ham-fisted. So I wasn't crazy about that particular character in that arc, but there wasn't very much in the game that I didn't like. Otherwise, is there anything in the game that stood out to you guys that was not up to snuff for you? Because that would be like a small complaint of mine. Just, you can even argue like the gay relationship and all of that, but that seemed way less ham-fisted, because I'm sure that's exactly what was happening. Was lots of gay sex between these guys, no doubt. No doubt about it. Plus, like the straight sex, I'm sure that was, and that does happen in the game too. So that seemed like I could see people complaining about that and being like, "Oh my god!" But I'm like, no, that probably was real. But I would imagine that a random Ethiopian priest in Bavaria in 1500s would have been a little more strange. So I had to just throw that out there, and it is what it is.
I missed that character until like a second playthrough. I was just like, wow, because it really he didn't have much impact in the story. And then to your point, I did see like, okay, they're giving the perspective of, how his interpretation, and obviously color people in the drawings and stuff like that, here or there for me. But I think for me, which was a weird one, I don't know why this bothers me. It shouldn't bother me the way it does. But obviously we know the reason, like there's no voice acting in the game. I get that, right? For this type of game, but I just love hearing the text being written, even some things when things are said or written incorrectly, they're corrected. When you learn stuff about people, Andreas' perception of them changes sometimes their font, and now he looks at them more positively or more intelligent and stuff like that. So that was the one nitpick that I did tell this to Josh, was throughout the game, again, no voice, but there's this scene, I think you guys see it, where it's like this guy's doing this amazing Gregorian chants and singing, and I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell is voice in the game now? Like what? Like they're literally singing the most beautiful song in the church. I was like, what is happening? Not that I hated this song, but it just threw me off, because the whole game really had no sound effects and no kind of voices from characters. So again, weird little nitpick from me, but I did ask, and he never really gave an explanation. It was kind of like, yeah, we did it. And I did ask, Josh, if, because Disco Elysium did actually kind of start like with all text or whatever, that they eventually voiced it, but he basically said it was just way too many characters, for him. And then, which he made a great point, which is like at some point, we all have an interpretation of how these characters may sound, and having that may kind of throw people off. So I respected that decision. Plus, it was a small team, small budget, so I get it.
It's interesting. There's that scene, I think, in Act 3 when you meet the traveling bard and like the singer, the lute player's like, it can't speak. And you, by the way, you never learn why. If you ask him why, he like gets insulted and like won't talk about, or like he writes down everything that he's saying or whatever. And I know that was interesting. But when they sing their song in the tavern or in the inn, there is no vocals, which is interesting. So yeah, it does seem a little bit inconsistent in some sense. I do like the decision, although I'm sure it was not necessarily a creative one if they had the money and the budget and the wherewithal to do it. I do like nonetheless that it wasn't voice acted. I think in games that are so text heavy like this, I just read, and I think most people do, way faster than people talk, and you just kind of feel like you're waiting. I don't like that. In more live actiony AAA games, I think voice acting is obviously way more essential, but I actually think it's even pushed into places where it doesn't necessarily belong on a fairly regular basis. Like where, like, what was it? Was it Sea of Stars or one of those games had voice acting? One of those, or maybe it was Octopath or something, where I'm like, why is there voice acting in this? Doesn't need to be voice acting in this particular role playing game. So yeah, I didn't mind so much that. I also want to shout out the art. I just think the art is beautiful. The animations are really cute too. I was pointing out all the cute animations to Micah that I thought were cute. There's when you're in the fields, you see there's like a 3-frame animation of a guy like using a hoe. And in the background, the cats and the dogs animate really beautifully when you interact with them. And
beautiful stuff.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I was going to say I think I closed it. I don't have it open anymore. Maybe I do. The development. So I'm reading the design. Yeah. The Nuremberg Chronicle. So I don't know anything about this. The Nuremberg Chronicle is a book, an illuminated book, and an encyclopedia from 1493. That was apparently a major inspiration. Here, I'll put it in here if you guys want to look at it. The Wikipedia was a major inspiration for the way the game looks, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, it really, really is. Like, it's funny. The art style is wonderful, beautiful. What an amazing thing to pull from this 650-ish year old manuscript. Just good shit. Or 550 years old, I guess I should say. So I wanted to give a shout out to them because I really think they executed on a wonderful art style that was probably pretty cheap to do and really, really operated very well in the game. And I love the lack of music for the most part. there's a really soaring intro and all of the rest, but I love the silence, just the sound effects of the birds chirping and the wind and people working. And I don't know, I dug it. It was a very heady game that really compelled me forward. Even in story-driven games, I don't always play them necessarily for the story or don't necessarily care what's happening. When I play Far Cry or something, I'm playing for other reasons than the story. I don't really give a shit what happens. It's always interesting, but I'm never really driven to see what happens next. But in this game, I was like, especially by the third act, I'm like, where is this going? And it ends up in a pretty wonderful place. Micah, does anything about the game stand out to you as being poor? Is there anything that you didn't enjoy about it?
Well, I agree with you that the mini games could have been left out, and I don't think it would have, really impacted the experience either way. I didn't actively dislike the mini games, but some of them were just like without really telling you what to do, it's like figure it out, which is kind of fun. But then it's like, well, I don't want to look like an idiot in front of the blacksmith, okay? Like, things like that. Or actually, I messed up the Christmas cookies. And I didn't realize, I was like, maybe there just isn't enough dough. And then my dad dies and he didn't get a Christmas cookie. So I felt real bad. All right. So I was just like, oh, great. I did so well. I would say that was really one of the only things that stood out to me is some of the mini games, like helping Otalia straighten picture frames in her hut. I was just like, this just isn't really adding anything. Yeah. You could have just said, okay, I'll help you and just watch him do it type deal. It didn't add a lot, some of the mini games, but then at the same time, it does break up the gameplay just a little bit. It adds just a bit of variety to someone who maybe doesn't like visual novels, who doesn't really like adventure games. It's giving you something different to do. But I agree with you that I felt like those could have been left out, and I would have been perfectly cool with it. I would have been fine with these things just being little animations and not necessarily me actually doing them. But otherwise, I do feel like the game is just from start to finish a very, really great experience. I'll say that like Act 3 started off so slowly that I actually Googled, is this worth finishing? Because I was like, the first 2 acts are murder mysteries. This one just has me flitting about town and there's boys after me. And I'm like, who gives a shit? And I actually Googled, like, is this worth finishing? And I saw people say, yes, finish the game. So I did. And it was worth it. But it started off so slowly. I was actually shocked and said, I don't want to sink 4 more hours into this if it's just going to be, a slice of life about Magdalene. Okay. So they almost lost me. They almost lost me because they were so subtle with the intro to Act 3.
I have to give you a little credit. I'm now recalling my emotional state starting Act 3, and I have to admit it was just jarring, right, to lose Andreas. And so I'm like, okay, where are we going here? And then the tone changed from her having to do this mural about Tassig and the history of Tassig, and it did start slow. It did start slow, and obviously, I think her dad got hit with the head when he was doing the printing press, and then it picked up there. I'm like, okay, but yeah, at first I was a little worried. I'm like, oh man, like this. Okay, what are we doing here? But no, it did come together. But great point there. Initially, my feeling was exactly that, Micah, and I'm glad I stuck with it enough and didn't get overly emotional about the loss of Andreas till like I stopped quitting the game kind of thing. But yeah, it was a funny part of the game for sure. Big switch, but well done at the end.
It's funny because I feel like I had more faith in it at that point where I was like, I was disappointed because you do like the character. It's like never mind. I was going to spoil The Last of Us Part 2, but it's like, you kind of just realize, okay, like, so where are we going? Like, what is the point of that? Usually when you make a big decision like that, it could be a disaster or it can pay off in a really big way. And I felt like the game was so good by that point that I was like, all right, well, this is obviously going somewhere. And it did. Right. So I must say I had a level of belief. I'm also one of those kinds of guys that really likes to beat the games that I play. So it really takes a lot. The last game I bailed out on was like Banishers. That was like 15 games ago, probably at this point. So I just, I wasn't going to quit at that point, because I had seen so much of it. But it does bring up the point that I feel like a lot of people, and I said this COG on Sacred, was I sense this game isn't for most people.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. I don't think it's overly sophisticated or anything. I don't think it's hard to play. I think it's more like just the subject matter is probably not going to be incredibly riveting to people. And I hope that more people give it a chance. But I would understand that most people that see this are not going to be into it.
No, great point. I want to get, now we at Act 3, so to speak, with Magdalene. I wanted to get, Colin, your thoughts on like her arc, her journey. And again, this is now the introduction of the printing press. No, the abbey is torn down. The time, like it's really a changing of everything we've known from Tassing. So like, how are you processing that part, and then just her character in general? Because this is a big shift in the game.
Yeah, it's interesting because they really did choose. And again, it's why you want to play the game through again, because they choose a character you don't even think twice about at all. Like you said, you can give her a book. And I think in my own playthrough, I gave her like some, I don't know what I was thinking, but like some medical text or something. And the dad's like, what the fuck? Like kind of like she's not free or something. But I didn't even think twice about it after that. I was like, oh, I'm giving you what I thought would be like the most valuable or useful book. I wasn't really thinking about the child, I guess. And then you realize you end up playing as that child. But what I like about her, and what I think I realized, and I would love to know what Josh thinks about this, maybe if he's on the show, I'll be able to ask him. But it could have been anyone, really. It's about for me, I interpreted it as being a conduit by which objective history had happened and how it will be subjectively interpreted by the progenitors of that history, and how it doesn't really change the outcome of the game, which I think is in and of itself somewhat powerful, because we kind of just inexorably march on through time anyway. But it's like, how do you see, especially, I think it's 3 or 4 major things. Like, are you going to interpret the kind of the paganism and the occultism? Or are you going to interpret the Romans? Are you going to interpret, ourselves? And how are you going to interpret the Holy Roman Empire and Charlemagne and all these different things and our own existence? And I love that. I think that that's so cool. So it almost becomes less about her. That's almost the masterstroke of the third act, is it's about her because she's the conduit by which the art can be made, because her dad is down and out, right? And ultimately dying of this assault. But in hindsight, now that I know what the game's about and have played it all the way through, I'm like, that's really cool, because in and of itself, picking the random person is what it was all about to begin with. It becomes much less about Mailer, and it becomes much more about the place itself and the location, this fictional location, and the interpretation of events. Because again, at best, it's not that he's an unreliable narrator, because we're interpreting the game through our own lens. We see everything that's happening anyway, but he himself, Andreas, doesn't know that the decisions he's making are specious. Like, you're forced to make bad decisions, and they bring us to this position where it has to be interpreted by the future. And I think that that's what the game's about. And in and of itself, that's an echo of the idea of illuminated manuscripts to begin with. So there's a deep cleverness to this game, in my opinion, that if people are willing to play it through, I think they'll see it, especially if they play it twice. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess that's the way I would see it.
It makes perfect sense. I get it. I wanted to see how you processed it, at the moment it happened and while Act 3 is going on, and the responsibility of Magdalene, to try to recount this story, and how do you depict it, right? Do you hide certain things? This is a big responsibility for her, and then also, I think Micah kind of alluded to, we do see subtle hints of, I wouldn't say female empowerment, but just things are changing as far as being, wed to someone. Like, she has a choice of whether or not she's going to continue to interact with I forgot the gentleman's name, who's very, very aggressive.
Yeah, I forgot his name too. I'll look it up.
It's Otto Jr.
Oh,
so
Otto
he goes by
Jr.
Otts.
Otts, right?
Yeah. Otts is feeling, huh? So I thought there was little subtle things going on there, but yeah, continue. That was just pretty much where I was going.
No, it's well said. And by the way, the whole courtship thing is so interesting in small towns like this and in small communities where you really only have maybe an opportunity. And I think that that's kind of what the focus was on that with the people around them, was regardless, especially kind of Magdalene being more passive about it, is like, regardless of how you feel about it, it's not going to get any better than this here. Like, this is kind of who you're going to be. We've known you've been on this trajectory with each other since you were both kids, probably, because there's 50 of us or whatever it is. And she ultimately ends up going somewhere else, where I don't even remember where she ends up going to.
Prague, I think.
Oh, Prague. Right. The Jewish inclusion was interesting too. That also felt very ham-fisted, although it's more included in the ultimate outcome of the story. But that was interesting too. Like, it was It was a very liberal 1500s
see,
in Germany.
That didn't bother me, though, only because the novels I read, I told you that it's a fantasy version of the Holy Wars. That included several Jewish characters. Now, they were the mages, which was fucking sweet. But the whole thing of like that included sort of the Jewish characters and the Christian characters, some of them being very against each other, some of them just trying to be like, well, let's just have peace and keep it the way it is. You know, but just you do your thing, I'll do mine. They were all like, they were fully included in this book that was set in the 1400s. And I was like, well, that felt fine. So them being in this book and the whole angle where I think it's Brother Guy is donating money to like Jewish refugees or whatever.
Which
like
I didn't get until my second playthrough. I didn't even get that arc.
Right. So that didn't feel forced to me, only because it's like, it is just another intersection of history where it's like, yeah, we have all these different belief systems mingling about, and people are willing to murder each other over it, all this stuff. It just felt like that felt just realistic of like, some of the people are just like, they're just people, whatever. And some of them are like, So I don't know. That felt fine.
Yeah. I didn't have any problem with it per se at all. And it is real. I mean, Jewish people lived all over Europe at this time. It's just, I wanted them to make, if anything, I felt like making the game feel as suffocating and claustrophobic as possible would have made the game even stronger. Like, remove the outside world as much as you can and make it about like this stifling community where there's no mobility, there's no way out. People are kind of subjected to this generational taxation situation with the Abbey. They are at the whim of the weather. They're at the whim of travelers coming to to worship there. And I feel like, yeah, it felt like giving Magdalene, in other words, that those characters' inclusion was to give her a way out at the end of the game, really. And I'm like, oh, it's disappointing that she even had a way out. Yeah, because it would have made it so much more powerful. Instead, she kind of paints this thing and leaves. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I might have gone in a different direction, but who the fuck am I, really? I really think that this is a special game and a really, really fun game and a cool game. I would recommend it highly to people. And if you have any interest in European history, obviously, I think you would want to check this out. The Renaissance, the Reformation, all of that. I think it's for you. If you're an adventure gamer or a graphic novel or a visual novel, rather, player, I think you would maybe like this as well. The choices are cool. Kag had brought it up earlier. There is a system where the game kind of tracks the choices you make and shows you the choices that you've made and how they will interact with. It creates like a little status bar basically and fills up. And if it fills up, then you've kind of succeeded the dice roll. And if it doesn't, then you fail the dice roll, and it's all based on things that it'll tell you what to do. So if you're very like a note taker or a fastidious player, you can actually make note of these things for your second or third playthrough and then try to make different decisions, because it kind of really overtly tells you, oh, you did this and you didn't say this to this guy and you said this to this person and so on and so forth. So we come to this outcome. It's pretty cool. I really am sorry that more people didn't play this game. It kind of seemed to have come and gone. And I'm glad that it kind of got a second life. I feel like that Xbox choosing to put it on PlayStation as the first game really was a sign that they understand the quality of it, and that I don't think it sold well on PlayStation either. I would be surprised if it did, but I think it was a sign that it's like, we should try to get this into more people's hands. I don't think that was a really similar thing with Hi-Fi Rush. I think Hi-Fi Rush was more about getting a Japanese game from a Japanese studio into a place where more people could play it. So I don't think that this is going to like revolutionize the world and make people see Pentiment for what it is, because it was already available on widely held platforms, but it gives more people an opportunity to play it. And I do encourage people to give it a try. I think it's only $20, something like that. So it's totally worth it. Closing comments on the game, Micah.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say this game, the story has some real highs and some real lows. There are some incredibly sad moments. There are some moments that'll have you like really angry and aggravated. It's just written that well, because in the absence of voice acting, as we mentioned, it is written so well that it comes through. And these subtle character animations, it is very simply done, but the faces do portray anger, surprise, fear. It is just from start to finish a really great experience. And the emotions, though, going from sadness to funny moments, like genuinely funny moments. There are times Il Peter had me actually like laughing, you know, and then having the moments that made me genuinely angry, that the widow can't inherit her own house. and it has to, sell it basically. Like she's just not allowed to stay in the house that her husband built for them and he died, so she can't keep it. It's things like that. And you're like, there's a lot of injustice in this world, and these peasants have no means to fight it. They, at one point, they're barred from fishing anymore. They're not allowed to fish in the lake nearby. Things like that you just realize there's just this world they're in is very unfair in a lot of ways. And it comes through in all those subtleties with the animation, the really fantastic writing. I definitely, if you're listening to this, you probably played it because we spoiled a bunch. But I hope that just by people seeing this episode in our lineup, it'll make them want to play the game so they can go listen to it. I see that a lot. People say, oh, I didn't play that, but I want to listen to the episode. I'll go check it out. I'm hoping that happens because I think this game deserves it.
Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be really nice. Cog, closing thoughts on the game.
Yeah, I'm glad we did this because Mike had kind of expressed all my thoughts 100%. I mean, I really enjoyed this game. It was such a gem, so well done. And the game has so much subtleties. Another thing that I remember too that I want to give a shout out is I actually had a little tension when the Archbishop came, right? And you're doing the investigation and you've got a lot of responsibility. And I just feel that, this game, Andreas is not a perfect character, he's a flawed character, but the way this game is expressed to you, the writing, what Micah said specifically, the animation doesn't get enough credit because you truly, not only you can see the emotions of characters really expressed well in this simplistic style, right? This very bespoke style. Shout out to you, Colin. What is it? The Nuremberg, how do you pronounce it?
Nuremberg the Nuremberg Chronicle?
Nuremberg Chronicle. Yeah. Like now I see the influence of it, right? In going for this style. I highly recommend people give this game a shot. It is going to surprise you. And I think once you start the addiction and then seeing this thing through. And again, I think it's the genius in Pentiment is literally within its name. What the definition of Pentiment is and relationship to how this story plays out is very fascinating to me. And I always like to see how people process when they get new information, right? How does that affect their view on what they believed up until that point? Was it like the whole, cognitive dissonance and all that kind of stuff? It brings up a lot of good points. And the final thing, obviously, the religious context, the peasant, revolution, the Protestant Reformation. There's so many things going on within this story. And it's a really well done mosaic, in my opinion, of all these things going on in a fictitious time, but a fictitious town in a realistic time period.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's a great game. I hope you. I'm looking at the PlayStation Store offering for it. It's $19.99. Only 420 ratings, but rated 4.75. I love the key art too, with him sitting at the table, but there's it's like a cloud of smoke or some plant or something coming out of his head. It's pretty cool. Mike and I were saying it would be neat. I would imagine they send some of this stuff out as cool, like swag for Xbox Media or whatever, but. It would be cool to get the calendar from the first two acts that shows you, or the clock that shows you like where everyone is and all of that. And then it turns into a calendar in the third act.
And we can even mention that one last thing. Remember like the game, I don't know if what specific calendar that is when you do the day-night cycle, but I thought was very subtle is Act 3, the introduction of the clock, because that to me kind of meant the time period was changing. Like it's so many subtleties to this game that you could tell Josh really, as he's a history major and he has all his wealth of knowledge and stuff. You could tell the amount of dedication he put into this.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's a full realization of what I think games, the potential of them, not from a graphical perspective or anything like that, but just from an engagement perspective, a storytelling perspective. Games like this, I think, are an incredibly positive inclusion into the PlayStation ecosystem, and certainly the Xbox and PC ecosystem that's had them since 2022. So I hope people will give it a chance and check it out. And hopefully I can convince them to let Josh come on the show to talk about, again, the game, but I really love to talk about the background of the game and just the historical references and why it's important and again, and all of that, because I just think the head fake of the game being about the Reformation, but not really, is really pinnacle to what makes it so powerful. So, all right, my friends. Oh, and by the way, I have this in my notes too. I have to mention this. Mike and I were talking about this, about how, you hear things and you don't necessarily know what they are, but you've heard of it before, right? Like someone will mention this science thing or this history thing or whatever, and you don't know it, but you're like, oh, I've heard of that. I'm not familiar with it. The entire idea of the anchoress, and you know what I'm talking about? The nun that is
the lady in the
trapped, like they build the church around
her.
her.
That was forced to do the things for Father Thomas, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I had never heard of that in my entire life. That was like something I authentically learned about. And there's like a huge Wikipedia article for it. And I was like clicking off of it to try to find some things about it. But it was cool to like not only learn a lot of new things, which the game taught me anyway, but to like hear something new. Like, oh, I've never even heard of this before. Like of a devout priestess that's locked into the church and digs her own grave and shit. And then waits to die. It's like, okay. I don't know how the fuck I never heard of that. But fair enough.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Like that's like deep Catholicism I've never even heard of. So yeah, I wanted to shout out for that too, because it's not every day we're bombarded with information. It's not every day you hear something that you've been like, didn't even know that was a thing. So I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, appreciate all you guys out there. Let's go around and say goodbye to everyone. And Cog, I appreciate you joining us today. Be well. Have a good rest of your week.
Much appreciated. It's always great to link up with Sacred, and then obviously Micah. They gonna have to break us up. There's too many times now. This is awesome. I got the Royal Company with me, but yeah, fantastic discussion, and get Defining Duke tomorrow. So I'm excited for that to get with Maddie.
Cool, man. And Micah, I'll see you shortly.
Yes, indeed. I got to make a confession. This is where dyslexia pops
How long
in.
has it been since your last confession?
Never, I suppose, but here's the first one. When I bought the game and I glanced at the title quickly and I thought it was called Penitent, and I kept calling it that. And then one day Colin's like, it's Pentiment. And it's like, I just glanced at it so quickly. That's when dyslexia brain kicked in. I was like, yeah, I know that word. I've seen that word before.
Say 5 Hail Marys and 2 Our Fathers. You'll be fine. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me today. And I appreciate all of you guys out there. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I know the game's a little bit older and you're probably like, well, it's a little slow out there right now, first of all. But there's a few other things I would like to do these kinds of episodes on for some smaller games as we have the opportunity now. It won't be like this forever. So we might as well take advantage of it. So I'm glad we got to talk about Pentiment, and let us know what you think. And hopefully go check out the game, whether on Game Pass, it's there right now, PC and Xbox. You can buy it a la carte on those platforms as well. And you could buy it a la carte on Switch, PS4 and PS5. The PS4 and PS5 versions come together so you can play it later. That's kind of a small, low-key, exciting thing for me when I like a game, is when they have 2 versions of it. And I'm like, well, in the years to come, I can go play the PS4 version and get the trophies again. Yeah. So it's just an exciting little Colin brain thing, let's say. All right, my friends. Be well. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. Patreon.com/LastDayMedia for early ad-free access, and LastDayMedia.store for merch. Until next time, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.